Hi everyone, so I'm Tom Parry from the Department for Environment, Farming and Rural Affairs, and my job is Head of Digital Sustainability within DEFRA, but we've got kind of two hats. So one is making sure that DEFRA Group's own technology is as sustainable as possible, and that includes technology used by about 30,000 staff across DEFRA Group, including Environment Agency staff that Kate will know about, as well as our public-facing digital services, so things like flood alerts and applying for fishing rod licenses and stuff like that we can't do. But we also coordinate some of the work across government taking place on this topic. And one of the kind of things I want to get across in this 8 minutes is that we're really keen to make sure we don't have all the answers in DEFRA, and we have to lean a lot on others in government and in our supply chain in academia to really help us kind of work through some of this stuff. So we certainly are not trying to kind of imply that we've got all the answers here. That being said, I've tried to set out on the next few slides kind of where we think we need to go as government and some of the opportunities we've got, and to try and do that through a bit of a kind of data lens. So first of all, some scary data. I think if everyone's kind of here already and joined online, you'll kind of hopefully be convinced of the importance of the topic of sustainability. But just if you're not, some charts on the left making the point about the wider kind of climate crisis. About how that is happening to us now, and anyone that was on a bus yesterday would have felt that in the human level. But then the kind of role of IT within that. So that chart in the middle, I think, is still surprising. I've been in this job about a year and a half, and it was surprising to me when I started that the IT industry responsible for more global emissions than aviation and shipping combined, which is a real kind of eye-opener. And then the chart on the left, which is some homemade slideware, so apologies if it's not that clever, but what I'm trying to get across there is that the UK, about 6 million tonnes of e-waste a year, only a third of that is recycled. So the kind of a lot of raw earth materials and stuff go into that. There's a huge kind of opportunity there, but at the moment a big issue too. Within government, that's especially the case. So chart on the left is UK government's ICT emissions. So you can see about 360,000 tonnes CO2 equivalent the last reported year. And it's quite a busy chart on the right, but I think you can hopefully get the overall story is that our volumes of e-waste are going down, but they're still really high. And within that volume, we still want to do more to move the percentage up towards reuse from recycle and keep the percentage going to landfill low. That's particularly important. The DEFRA Secretary of State's got a real priority around circularity and stuff too that will support. So we're government, so we have a strategy to this, which everyone will be relieved to hear. But we do want to pull together what we're doing because there's so much good work happening within departments. Jennifer's already talked about the one login stuff, and across our supply chain, as I mentioned. But what we want to try and do is to help people put their own work within the kind of context of some key priorities so they know what else is happening so we don't duplicate stuff and we kind of line up sensibly. So set some priorities and outputs and sort of say who's doing what. Now is a really good time for it. Gavin mentioned some of the changes going on at government at senior level around this stuff at the start. There's a whole lot of new government blueprints and commitments that are happening right now. So if we influence it right, it's a good time to do it. If we don't, we're kind of missing out on a big chance. That strategy's being worked on now, and we welcome input to it. Some high-level themes will be keeping the emissions journey on net zero going, but kind of broadening that out and thinking, how do we make sure that our wider resource use is as circular as possible? We reduce waste. Move on to think about things like water and heat use, kind of beyond carbon, some people call it. I think you could do with some clarity around how we're tackling that. And social value, again, something that we don't often really think about when we talk about sustainability, but it's part of procurements. Often sustainability, social value is one part of procurement. Suppliers have got loads to offer around how they can bring social value to their work. Again, we haven't really kind of articulated what we're looking for. Penultimate one, how we get more resilient to climate risk. We've had data centres falling over in heat waves in the UK recently. In NHS was these examples. That's only likely to get a bigger risk. How do we manage that? How do we adapt to it? The last one is how we make sure that as AI develops and as the next AI comes along, sustainability is kind of thought of as that first becomes a question for people and it's not something we're playing catch up on. So some big challenges for us there. So a few data-specific points. First of all, data itself is a really big part of this issue. Gavin mentioned a byte and a bit at the start. So a zettabyte is, I think, a billion terabytes. There's about 64 zettabytes stored globally, which roughly equates to 128 billion tons of CO2 just from stored data. About 60% of that data is never used. People will be familiar with some of these stats, but you can quibble on them. But the point is, a lot of data is never used, but causing a lot of emissions. AI, people will have seen the news coverage about how AI can drive that. But I do want to just quickly, data can be part of the solution too. So the thing in the top right is San Francisco traffic lights, where Google used AI to reprogram the timings in all those traffic lights to reduce the amount of idling that happened across the street system, and that reduced emissions in San Francisco by, I think, just 10%, just by kind of clever use of data. So the data can help us to data insight. Talking about emissions, biggest cause of emissions for UK government isn't at the moment hosting or how it's the devices people use, and within that, 2/3 of that is not about how much you keep it on the battery life, it's the manufacture and distribution, so making it and sending it out to you. So people say, what one thing can I do? The best thing you can do is hang on to your device as long as possible. But this is what we're trying to get more of this, so we can make sure that we're targeting it on kind of where we can have the biggest impact. And within DEFRA, we've just moved to a new end user contract where the default model would be to use refurbished devices rather than new ones to try and kind of hit that source. Data challenge, a question was asked before about AWS location versus market-based reporting. And it is a difficult one because AWS and others have shown real willing over the past year to work with us on getting this better. Jennifer mentioned they are getting better, and we're getting better at asking them the same thing across government in terms of improving their reporting. But there is still a kind of fundamental thing about trying to encourage people to use actual emissions based on the location of the data center rather than market-based, which is where they can kind of buy certificates that means they can report zero because they can offset what they actually produce by investing in green energy. But those things in themselves are helpful too. But it's a challenge we have to understand really what we're emitting. And then Jennifer mentioned too, we're getting a lot better based on all that kind of work across government and with suppliers, and actually being able to say what we want people to do, what best practice looks like. I put the address in there, but these slides go out, you can look at it yourself. There's a really good set now of, we call them the greener service principles, that look at a digital service kind of life cycle from start to finish and include some of the specific things we want people to do throughout that life cycle, whether it's architecture, DevOps, how you actually build and operate the design. There are some specific ones here for data that I'm not going to go through and read out, but hopefully people can see here some of the stuff that we are trying to encourage people to do that are getting more tangible and helpful for people. And those are all hyperlinks, so if you click on that link, you can go and read these in a bit more detail. Last bit, I mentioned before, we have a lot of work from our suppliers. We call it the Government Digital Sustainability Alliance. We've got over 60 organisations in that now. Some of them are in those logos on the right. We also have academic institutions, Oxford University and others are in there. So if anyone is interested in getting involved in that work, contact us on that web address and go and find out more on that address. 8 minutes.
Thank you very much.